The OG, the legend, the one that inspired Berserk and many other manga to come, taking place in a post-apocalyptic war-torn world where only the strongest survive, and the epitome of all that is masculine. Yeah, you already know what it is. We're about to talk about Hokuto no Ken, otherwise known as Fist of the North Star.
貴様の拳などかほどにも効かんわい。お前はもう死んでいる。何？
I finally got around to going back and checking out this inspirational manga series created by Buranson and drawn by Tetsuo Hara. And I have a lot of thoughts, and if you're new here, my review style is pretty much just telling you my perspective of the series and what I got out of it as opposed to just giving you a list of facts about it. Also, I try my best to not get into spoilers, so you should be mostly safe unless you consider Kenshiro punching somebody in the face as a spoiler because, well, he does. Like, a lot. So right off the bat, this manga lets you know what kind of world we are walking into. The planet has essentially been ravaged by nuclear war, and modern civilization has been broken down. People survive within a barren desert-like wasteland by whatever means they can, and some have managed to form communities and small villages, all the way up to forming kingdoms, all within the landscape of collapsed buildings and war-torn cities. And with this setup alone and just looking at the outfit of the main character, it is no surprise that this manga takes heavy influence from the Mad Max movie series, at least the original trilogy since this was long before Fury Road existed. Even Kenshiro's leather outfit, right down to the shoulder pad, pretty much matches Mel Gibson's in The Road Warrior. And just like in The Road Warrior, in order to survive in this world, many people have defaulted back to barbaric and savage ways of getting what they want, forming gangs, militias, and tribes that maraud and pillage others for food, resources, and even women. Guns also seem to be non-existent here, so a variety of more brutal weaponry is at play, from blunt clubs to machetes, and much more. But of course, nothing is more deadly than the secret martial arts passed down to their heirs over generations that have granted particular individuals the raw physical strength to completely decimate their opponents with their bare hands. One such martial art is Hokuto no Ken, otherwise known as Fist of the North Star, belonging to the hands of our protagonist Kenshiro, a stoic badass who physically looks like a cross between Sylvester Stallone and Bruce Lee, who absolutely dominates all of his opponents by utilizing this sacred martial arts style. The intent behind the martial art is that it's designed to locate and hit specific pressure points of the body, much like a very violent and horrific version of acupuncture that can stop blood flow, cause paralysis, break limbs, and literally make you explode like a wet bag of flesh. The manga plays it straight and fully embraces the feeling of that hyper-masculine 80s action, and I absolutely love that aspect of it. It made no apologies whatsoever as to what it was, or the themes of strength and what kind of strength a man should have and the ways that he should obtain it. It shows the positive and negative sides of power and how it can affect the minds of men, and it manages to teach a few valuable lessons along the way. It doesn't hide the more brutal nature of mankind once law and order is stripped away, and it showcases what men desire from a very primal point of view. Also, despite being technically a shonen series, this is incredibly violent and explicit, at least when it comes to the gore. There isn't really much sexuality or nudity at all that I can remember, but the details of the bodies being ripped open and apart are in the hyper-stylized violence, and it's on full display. So if you're not a fan of gore, I would definitely stay away from this one. The story follows our protagonist Kenshiro, and Kenshiro is pretty much the staple, heroic, strong male power fantasy that you want him to be. He's kind of like a hard R, somewhat more realistic Superman. What I mean by that is that he's someone whom the audience is meant to look up to and strive to be more like, and at the same time he has very few flaws and always manages to overcome any given situation. Kenshiro's only real flaw is that he desires peace and yet is constantly forced to engage in battle to protect and defend others. He was trained since childhood in this deadly secret martial art, and now as an adult, he travels the land just trying to survive and getting pulled into the troubles and hardships of others. Again, very similar to Mad Max. And yes, he does have personal battles in the series, but most are external, and the internal battles he does face deals mostly with the pain of loss of those around him. That despite how strong he is, he will still lose others in the process. But also a focus of the series is that Kenshiro's sadness is part of what drives him to be stronger than those who have shut out that aspect of themselves. a metaphor that only through pain can one truly become stronger. We must face challenge and hardship in order to be able to grow. But like I said, Kenshiro himself is very rarely at a disadvantage or incapable of defeating anyone. And this leads to many cathartic moments of showing very bad people doing very bad things, and then having Kenshiro show up and literally rip them in half. This is essentially the bulk of the series, and it can get really repetitive at times, but I'll get into that in a moment. There are some other great characters that I want to mention. First are the kids, Bat and Lin, who immediately gave me very Isidro and Shirake type vibes. In fact, many aspects of this manga, there is bits and pieces of what you can see were pulled into for inspiration to Berserk. Kenshiro represents all that is masculine, and that includes placing him in a leadership/fatherly role. He rescues these children from certain death, and they follow him on his adventures like sidekicks, and eventually grow up to be powerful warriors in their own right, taking guidance and teaching from watching Kenshiro face his many adversaries. One character I really liked early on in the story was Rei. This guy was searching out Kenshiro, believing him to be the one that killed his sister, and he wanted revenge. But the two of them form a partnership, and Rei to me became one of the most sympathetic characters in the entire manga. There was a moment in particular when he spoke basically about how children view and look up to strong men, and how their mothers that birthed them would tell them the stories and talk about their legendary adventures and battles when they couldn't be around. And it really hit me in a strong way for some reason, and I think it's just something to do with the idea of legacy. You know, I want to have kids someday, and I hope the woman that I'm with would tell the child of the good that I did and what they could aspire to be, and it just got me super emotional. There's a lot of manly tears to be had in this manga, and I think this manga displays masculinity in a very nuanced way, showcasing the most positive and negative aspects of power and determination. The most prime example is the difference between Kenshiro and his brother Rao, whom serves as the primary antagonist for a bulk of the story. Kenshiro has way too many brothers, by the way, but anyways, Rao is pretty much the most consistent. And between them, I think the story really shows great examples of masculinity and the defaults of when it's placed in a world that doesn't have any rules. Now, I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent here, but stay with me. I think deeply rooted within all men is this desire to achieve and conquer, to consistently rise up. And I think that we all have an aspect of wanting to be the alpha of our own tribe, so to speak. Human beings, we come from tribes from back in the day, and back in the primal days, it was important to be the strongest in order to be able to lead and protect that tribe. And the more you could conquer with your strength, the better off your tribe, your family, and your offspring would be. But this is also often met with a lot of violence towards those weaker than you. And within all men is the capability of violence because we need it for survival and for protection. But to be a true man, in my opinion, is the ability to decipher when it is appropriate to use that violence. It is the difference between being a king and being a tyrant, being a Kenshiro or being a Rao. Without rules or authority, and especially without money, the one standard and rule that every living thing understands and accepts is violence. It is the ultimate ruling force of the world. With violence, one can use it as a means to obtain what they want, or a threat to keep others in line. Rao uses his sheer, raw strength and martial arts skills to become a warlord, conquering as much as possible. And with that, no one can challenge him, and those that try get royally fucked up. Kenshiro, on the other hand, is stoic and reserved. He uses his strength to protect and work for the betterment of those around him. Because a man that is not capable of violence will oftentimes always be a victim to violence. Kenshiro gains respect by heroic action. Rao gains fear by displays of his violence. But I do also like how Kenshiro is not afraid to kill his opponents when need be. He recognizes that in this world without rules, the idea of reformment doesn't really play into it, and a lot of these characters are presented to just be straight up evil assholes. Kenshiro does what he has to do for the betterment of those around him, and he consistently takes that burden on himself so others don't have to. I can understand somebody looking at Fist of the North Star and just seeing a bunch of jacked muscle men killing each other, and maybe even labeling it as toxically masculine in today's age. Also, seriously, what are the guys in this manga eating? This is a desert wasteland, but all these motherfuckers are roided out of their minds and jacked. Is there like wells of protein powder or something just laying around? But anyway, Compared with a lot of modern day ideas and agendas, I really appreciated the fact that this manga was so unapologetically itself. It displays a dark, brutal world where the way to survive is through strength, but also that there is a positive and negative way to use that strength. But that strength still matters, that you aren't allowed to be weak in this world. It's not that you can't have emotion, like I said, it's Kenshiro's sadness that makes him stronger, but it's being able to use that sadness to push yourself to progress further. There is also a theme of accepting death and being willing to face it head on. Yes, within a literal battle, but at its core, the theme of many stories with warriors, knights, soldiers, samurais, or what have you, being able to face an inevitable death as a man and not run away from it in fear or try desperately to avoid it, is a common trope. But even if your body is breaking or you only have moments left, to be able to stand as firm as you can and say that I did my motherfucking best and I'm gonna keep going until my final breath. And it can serve as a pretty inspirational moment when watching these scenes. But now, having praised the hell out of this manga, I do have to get into my negatives. And look, as much as I appreciate and value this manga for not only its lessons, but the legacy it's left behind, the stories it's inspired, and the godly artwork that is on display on every page, the repetitive nature of this manga got grating on me over time. Every single arc and scenario pretty much goes like, Kenshiro enters a town, the town has a giant muscular asshole ruling over them, Kenshiro fights his way through his minions easily, fights the big bad guy, defeats him, and moves on. And as soon as one giant muscular antagonist dies, almost immediately another one is introduced and the cycle repeats itself. The reason I mention Rao is because Rao was the only antagonist that actually felt like he had character. And spoilers for the next 20 seconds of this video, sorry, I just gotta say this real quick, jump ahead if you'd like. Once Rao died, the only thing this manga could do was do a huge ass pull and just have a twin called Kaio who looked exactly like Rao and use him as the final villain. And yes, sure, I like that segment on the island full of warriors, but it was also like Kenshiro leaves a land full of strong people that rule everything by force to go to a dangerous island that's full of strong people that rule everything by force. Like, nothing really changed, and even though it was hyped up to be something so different. There were times for me where it was really hard to try to finish this 245 chapter long series because it was the same stuff over and over and over again. I think that could partially be a product of the time, like keeping a status quo so anybody could pick up the manga at any time and understand it. Sure, there's an ongoing story, but it's nothing that a few lines of dialogue couldn't explain to you at any time. And several moments where it just felt the story could be wrapping up, and yet then another big strong guy ruling over a town showed up. And then there was also a time skip, and I thought, oh wow, you could really do some interesting things with this, and where the characters are now. But nope, it goes right back into a town with a strong guy again. There was, however, a story moment towards the end where one of the strong guys, now sick, had 3 sons at war with one another, but then the sons come together in their father's last moment and give him the fantasy of all of them loving each other again, and even doing it while one of them had a sword in his back, and it was kind of emotional for me with that sort of manly father-son feeling and giving your dad a last final beautiful moment. I really liked that scene. But all in all, I have to say I now completely understand and respect the legacy that Fist of the North Star has left even 30 years after its completion. Kenshiro is without a doubt one of the most badass characters to ever be created. And even those who have never read or watched any of Fist of the North Star know who he is, because he's just that iconic. And despite getting annoyed at its repetitive nature, I do have to say that I really did enjoy this manga. And to recommend it, though, is tough because I know this is not for everybody. You really have to enjoy not only hyper-violence, but hyper-masculine power fantasy style stories that never really let up or changed its direction at all. What you see is what you get, and if you like what you see, then you're going to get a whole hell of a lot of it. So if you want to check out a classic manga that hits all the beats of a 80s action explosive experience, then please do yourself a favor and read Fist of the North Star. Thank you all for watching this video, guys. I truly do appreciate it. Let me know your thoughts on this manga. Have you read it? Were you thinking about reading it? And do you love it or hate it? Are you somewhere in the middle? Let me all know that in the comments below. Also, liking and commenting on the video does help me out, and I would really appreciate it. And if you'd like to support the channel on that extra level, check out my merch store, link below. New merch just went up featuring the Ryan vs. Sasquatch arc, where you can get a very manga-styled image of me battling Squatch on a t-shirt, a hoodie, a mug, and much more, along with other items in the store as well to check out, so I'd really appreciate it if you gave that a shot. I also have a Patreon down below, and all my various social media links where you can follow me. Other than that, guys, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I will talk to you next time.